Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Pennsylvania Republican Senate candidate Mehmet Oz of New Jersey, more honestly, kind of gave away the game on his views on abortion last night. It happened during that debate with Democratic Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, the two men, of course, squaring off for that Senate seat. Now, before we play the tape, it is important to note that generally, the way Republicans have dealt with this issue since the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade is to lie or change the subject or dodge or obfuscate. But in this case, Oz was on stage during debate and he had to answer the question.
As a physician, I've been in the room when there's some difficult conversations happening. I don't want the federal government involved with that at all. I want women, doctors, local political leaders, letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive, to put the best ideas forward so states can decide for themselves.
To me, what really nails that is the in the room part. Like, he starts with you're in the room having the difficult decision and then invokes the people who would be making that decision on abortion, a woman, her doctor, and local political leaders, so that we're all in the room together. You got Dr. Oz, you got a woman who's pregnant, and then you've got, I don't know, what would inevitably be the most extreme right-wing legislator telling her what to do. Someone like, say, Pennsylvania state senator and gubernatorial nominee Doug Mastriano, or fringe Republican state legislator in Texas. Those are the kinds of people who inevitably, under this regime, would be the ones looming over your personal decision, according to Dr. Oz. And in fact, this is a reality. We're already seeing this position unfold in real time. Here's an example in New Mexico. New Mexico has got a Democratic governor and Democratic legislature. Some local conservative lawmakers are looking to ban abortion at the town level to skirt state laws which allow it. The mayor of the town of Clovis, New Mexico, which is debating a ban, said, quote, "We hope this sends the message our state legislature that there are pro-life cities out there and we want to self-determine on this issue." That's who be in the room, the mayor of Clovis with you, with your doctor. These are the new front lines for the battle for reproductive rights, either a full-on ban or the sort of thing where the most right-wing legislator in your area tells you and your doctor that you can't have an abortion. But here's the really important thing to understand about this, to be clear. That's what Mehmet Oz believes should happen. And by Republican standards, Oz really actually does have their most moderate position. That's why he was saying it in the debate. He was, in that moment, trying to distinguish himself from the even more radical position, which is one step up, which is a national abortion ban at the federal level. Now, that's a position supported by many Republicans, including South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who's introduced legislation that would do just that. That position is endorsed by Trump-backed Georgia Senate nominee Herschel Walker, who, of course, has been accused of paying for a woman's abortion and trying to pressure her into a second, an accusation that is backed up with some documentary evidence. He's also a man who just tonight had another abortion-related allegation pop up, one that he reportedly pressured another woman he had a long relationship with into having an abortion in 1993, something Walker denies.
Obviously, we have to address the elephant in the room today, and that is another accuser has come forward. Anonymous, although she spoke to reporters today, saying that you pressured her to have an abortion and that you paid for it. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's a lie, and I've said that's a lie, and I hope people can see right now that Raphael Warnock and the left would do whatever they can to win this seat bite.
All right, well, this was Gloria Allred came forward with this client. You're saying you don't know this person?
What I'm saying is this is a lie, and I've said it once, and I've moved on. My campaign has moved on.
We've reached the stage where Herschel Walker denying having a woman have an abortion that he paid for is becoming a recurring bit on Fox News. That guy, Herschel Walker, is, of course, running on a ban abortion platform. And again, he's not alone. It is also the position of the Senate nominee in Ohio, J.D. Vance, another Trump-backed Republican. Now, the tricky thing about all this is that Republicans do know full well their ideas about banning abortion, criminalizing doctors, are unpopular. And so they avoid getting into specifics at all costs. Just take J.D. Vance, for example, who today struggled to articulate any exceptions he would support for that national abortion ban to a sympathetic Fox News audience.
Where do you come down on the issue of exceptions to that, if, you know, in the case of rape, incest, or other particular exceptions?
Yeah, John, so I'm very pro-life and not ashamed of it. Of course, you have to have some reasonable exceptions here, but I just want to save as many lives as possible. I think that's the goal of a pro-life policy.
So what's reasonable?
Make it easier for young moms to afford health care. Make it easier for people to afford, afford adoption services if they need to.
I'm sorry, let me just drill down on that. You said reasonable exceptions. What exceptions are reasonable to you?
Well, look, I think it's always hard to say every single possible exception. My goal, like I said, John, is to save as many lives as possible, to try to protect as many unborn babies as possible.
I'm going to move on, but one last chance for voters to hear what those exceptions might be.
Look, guys, I think that like I said, one obvious exception, of course, is you got to make sure that, you have life of the mother protected. There are other exceptions as well.
That's on Fox. That is on Fox. They're throwing him softballs. Like, just give us the exceptions thing so we can move on, because that's the most politically expedient thing. By the way, as we've discussed before on the show, when Republicans say life of the mother, we know what that looks like in reality because it exists in certain states. What it means, and we've seen this happen to actual women, that if a fetus is non-viable at 16 or 17 weeks, then that woman is going to have to sit around while doctors talk to lawyers and wait until her body basically starts to shut down or she goes septic, and she's then in imminent medical danger before she's allowed to get an abortion. But even that position is not the most extreme one Republicans hold on abortion. The most extreme position is one that seeks to ultimately avoid legislating it entirely by getting the Supreme Court to rule that life begins at conception, that a fetus is a person under the 14th Amendment. Now, we already saw dozens of Republicans in the House and Senate endorse this last year through legislation. They sought, quote, to implement equal protection under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, the right to life of each born and preborn human person. This would effectively make abortion under any circumstances at any stage of pregnancy 2 weeks legally tantamount to murder, among many other just almost incomprehensibly extreme consequences. Now, the ultimate goal of folks in the anti-abortion movement, again, who are committed to this vision, they really believe in it, is to get this in front of a sympathetic Supreme Court and just to have it be the official interpretation of the Constitution. They tried, they got knocked down for this term, but it's not going to go away. And if they could get that, it could not be legislated away by blue states or Democratic Congress or Democratic president. Now, one justice who would be on the top of the list of most likely justices to be open to supporting this wildly nutty interpretation is, of course, Samuel Alito. He's the one who wrote the decision that struck down Roe. Alito is now whining about the draft of the decision, which leaked before it became public, saying the real victims here are the conservative justices who voted to eliminate abortion rights.
It was a grave betrayal of trust by somebody. The leak also made those of us who were thought to be in the majority in support of overruling Roe and Casey targets for assassination, because it gave people a rational reason to think they could prevent that from happening by killing one of us.
Now, obviously, anyone considering that or threatening that is despicable. And no Supreme Court justice, just to be clear, were assassinated because of the leak. Thank God. What Alito's decision did do is imperil the actual lives of women who lack access to basic reproductive rights. We've told their stories on the show. It has forced a 10-year-old victim of child rape to flee her state to access an abortion, so she doesn't have to carry her rapist child to term. And of course, that is why the court is so useful to Republicans, because it saves them from having to fight unpopular political battles, which are often destined to fail. And when they do fight those battles, one way they're dealing with the issue is just to outright lie as the only way to gain support for their cause. Like in Michigan, there's another battle there. That's where right-wing groups are running this truly dystopian ad. It falsely claims the state's ballot proposal that would enshrine abortion rights would essentially lead to the forced sterilization of children without their parents' consent. Now, to be absolutely clear, it's just an outright lie. It's completely untrue, completely just made up from an alternate reality by abortion opponents who don't really want to defend their actual position that abortion should be banned on its merits. So I got to say this, give TV Dr. Mehmet Oz this much credit. What he said in yesterday's debates is bad, but it's as close as you're going to get to an honest answer from a Republican this cycle.